Right, everybody, I just want to welcome in. We've got everyone that is now dialing in for the live stream. So for those of you who are now dialing into the live stream, welcome. Sorry we have run a little bit late. We had to battle a bit of traffic in and around Sandton this morning, not because of Eskom for a change, but because some people had some accidents and things. But welcome in. We've just wrapped up a really fascinating session with PwC where we ran through a live attack simulation. And I think one of the overriding things that came through from that was how important having an incident response process is, the benefits it gives you and allows you to respond to an incident. Carrying on with that theme, I'm going to welcome up somebody who I've got to know really well over the last couple of years, somebody who's really surprised and astounded me with their level of professionalism and how well they've responded to incidents and managed claims on our behalf. So I'd ask if you, first off, actually, I'm going to ask everyone in the room to give a bit of a loud cheer to those who are aligned on the stream, so that we can let them feel as though they're welcome. And then from there, I'm going to call up Danny Myberg, who is the MD of Cianre and a good friend of mine and somebody who I think is going to provide a lot of value around the forensic process and how they go about doing what it is that they do. Danny? I thought I was going to have to do your presentation.
Hi, everybody. It looks like they are totally on the clock here. We were still talking nonsense on the other side. Thank you very much for the chance to come and chat with you. I'm going to take you through a little bit of a process. After the presentation was a tough one to follow, but I think there's a couple of very good pickup points that we can take from there. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to take you through the certainty that cyber threats are going to occur on organizations. I'm going to talk you through what companies can do to protect themselves and what we are looking at if we're also doing a security assessment against a client. One of the questions we had on that side was, how does a very small company protect themselves? And a lot of the hacking that we're seeing taking place, oh, sorry, I should be here. Candace, sorry, supposed to be in this block. A lot of the penetrations that we're seeing is taking place because of simple, small mistakes taking place. So if you do some of the basics right, there's a lot of protection that you can give yourself actually. Just want to grab my notes here. So it's difficult with both of them. So some of the things that I just wanted to touch on from the previous presentation is aspects of what do we see as the biggest risks currently in South Africa. So there's three main ones. Ransomware is very prominent. Secondly, we're also seeing that ransomware is being used by employees as revengeware. So an employee that wants to take a revenge on an organization can also execute it internally. Then we've got business email compromises. Business email compromises is basically where they come in between a client and a service provider or between two individuals, and they make a misrepresentation to one of them pretending to be the other, and they do a bank change, you're paying the money into the wrong bank. So it can happen in many instances, and it's a whole presentation on its own, but it is huge. Currently, the Secret Service is estimating that globally we're losing $300 million per month. It is more per month or per 2 weeks than what we saw some of the biggest ransomware and virus outbreaks has ever caused in terms of global numbers. And then obviously, lastly, we've got the hacking or the theft of data. That is a concern for us. So one of the things I just wanted to kick off, it's definitely not a situation of if it happens to us, but when it happens to us. The solution for organizations is definitely preparation. The exercise that we saw now, typically many of the security, well, not typically, we hope that organizations actually has some of these security measures in place. If you are employing or deploying security measures in the middle of an attack, you're already too late. And we saw that the whole presentation, there's not a chance for the good guys to win in this presentation because they are reacting to what the criminals are doing. We want a situation where we prevent it actually, where we detect it and prevent it. So number one, we need to look at creating an incident response policy and a plan. A plan should be, what do we do when it happens to us? So if we say The 3 compromises are hacking, ransomware, and business email compromise. Draft simulations for those. Start planning. If we do, what are we going to do? What are we going to tell our clients? What are we going to tell our personnel? How are we going to manage the situation? Develop standing operating procedures that your IT guys can actually use. We were involved in a matter that happened over December. Poor IT guy was the guy that took the graveyard shift between Christmas and New Year. And all of a sudden, the email service goes off. One of the executives was sending out the last of his communication to his clients, and he can't send his mail. He wants to go to Switzerland to go for his skiing holiday or whatever. Picks up the phone the IT guy, says, "Why is the mail not working?" IT guy responds with, "Listen, I've got bigger problems. We've got 400 servers that's been formatted. The email is not a critical situation at this stage." So when the ExCo member asked him, "Have you notified anybody?" He said, "No, I'm too busy fixing the problem." So they didn't have any procedures, what should be done, those type of things. Define your communication channel, select your incident response team. Are you doing it internally, going to get an external team? And then also, what services do you want this individuals to provide for you? Basic measures that you can employ if you're a small organization. Look for, as we saw, port scanning. Secondly, old software. We're seeing that old software is not being supported by the vendors anymore. Therefore, there's a lot of known vulnerabilities in them. So typically, majority of the cases we see old software is where the criminals are coming in. Patch management. If you don't have your patch management up to scratch, you are going to be knocked. Currently, the indication is that in 2018, there were 16,000 known vulnerabilities on existing software platforms that the organizations is not supporting anymore. So if I do a scan against your firewall and I'm seeing you running a FortiGate firewall and it's outdated, there's no patches loaded on it, no upgrades on it, I just go and check what known vulnerabilities there are. I use them against you, and it's like a key to your organization. We're also seeing that on average, the patch management is to patch critical problems is on average 195 days outdated. So there's 195 days where you don't even need to be a hacker. All you need to be able to do is do a simple scan against an organization, do a Google search, get the exploit, and execute it. Then secondly, passwords. You guys, on every incident that we work on, weak passwords. We've done investigations and incident response on listed companies where we find that over 700 personnel is using the password 01 or the company's name 01. It is absolutely, in this day and age where we're facing this, you're going to laugh if you see some of the lists of passwords that we're seeing. Even a password where you're using the @ sign in place of an A, a 3 in place of an E, a 0 in place of an O, ones instead of L's, etc. That's all known to the criminals. It is cracked within a second. Best way is to do words, not English words, but Afrikaans words and Zulu words, because they break a lot slower, or use a sentence, or use a schedule in terms of your passwords. Then cyber awareness amongst your personnel. Absolutely critical. They need to be aware of anti-phishing mechanisms. And then lastly, your firewall and your SOC should be up to date. So those are just some of the things where I picked up, one of the questions was, what should a small business do to protect themselves? If you look at your passwords, your patch management, your monitoring of your environment, the management of your firewalls, your outdated software, those type of things, you are already 50% there. Okay, it's what we should be doing, and we're not doing it. So policy structure, I'm just going to quickly go through this, and I actually want to take you to what we actually do when we get to an incident. So incident response plan should cover a couple of things for organization. Typical stuff. What are we going to do when it happens to us? Who's going to be responsible for what? I'm going to go to the practical side of it because I see we've got a little bit short time. Sorry, just get to that. Okay, I quickly just want to take you through the Nist framework. So one of the things we've got a couple of areas: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. So this is typically how an IT person approaches the security environment. We want to identify what's our risks. We want to protect the organization against it. After we've employed everything that we can to detect these type of things, we want to actually look at these devices. You won't believe how many organizations have monitoring tools on the environment, but they do not follow up on the alerts. They do not actually look at what's happening on the organizations. The team started off with a port scanning. If I ask you guys now, how many port scannings typically happen on an environment? On a daily basis, there are thousands. Every day you are faced with port scanning. The guys start to ignore these. They don't look at it anymore. You see alerts. They don't analyze them. That's why the guys get through. After we've failed in terms of our detection, then we want to go over to a response. How are we going to respond to these type of security breaches, and how are we going to recover to them? So typically, this is everything: the identify, the protect, and the detect is what the organization should be doing. This is where we should be spending the majority of our money as well. We don't want to get to respond. We don't want to recover for these things. But we have to bargain for it. We have to prepare for that. And that's where the incident response basically kicks in. So if we look at the prevention detection, there's many things that falls into them. Your prevention, you could be doing IR assessments, you can be red team, blue teaming, like we did here, one team attacking, the other one responding. We can do vulnerability assessments, penetration, testing, deploying SOC tools, deploying firewalls, etc. Our detection, exactly the same. We can have canaries. Canary is a server on the environment that if somebody connects to it, it actually triggers some alarms. So nobody is actually supposed to be looking at it, but you put a false hearing out there and you call it the file or the financial server. Hacker gets into it. As soon as he locks onto that box, it sends off alarms. There's many things that we can do to detect these breaches. And then in terms of preparation for these type of breaches, offsite data vaults, where do we keep critical information? We encounter that a lot of times. The organization, if ransomware runs on it, and they also keep their tools and the information regarding their system on their own network, how can you use it if it's encrypted? So it's a good thing to actually have an offsite storage place where you keep some information regarding your environment. Some of the breaches that Ryan showed you in the beginning that was published, when we got to those financial institutions, they couldn't even tell us what was on that server. They've got so many servers, it took us 2 days to find somebody to tell us what was encrypted, what's on that server. Is it a priority for us or not? So no topology in terms of what's saved where on the environment. So there's a lot of information that we can keep, that we can prepare for these type of security breaches. So incident, if one happens, these are the steps that we typically go through. We want to actually identify what's going on, validate that it's a real security incident, that it's not just somebody that made a mistake. In terms of if an insurance policy is triggered, we go out, we have a look at what's going on there. We contact the insurance company, we say, yes, we've got a ransomware, or no, this is actually just a server that's not working. Determine the scope, what is affected. So determine how many offices are taken down, what is affected, can the operation still continue, etc. We've got situations where a lot of organizations has got 15, 20, even more branches throughout South Africa. One of the first things you want to do in certain situations is disconnect the network from the internet. So if we don't know where the information is going out, disconnect it. Now, if that whole company is disconnected from the internet and we're sitting in Joburg, how can I contact them? How can I deploy tools on them? So a lot of times you actually need to dispatch people to every office to do certain things because you could actually be worsening the situation. So determine the scope, what is affected, incident origin, where is it coming in, what tools are attached, or what's the attack method, what vulnerabilities is being exploited, and we want to contain that situation as quickly as possible. So here we need to, a lot of times we actually need to take a decision. Are we first going to collect forensic evidence to investigate, or is it more important to format the server, get it up and running again, etc. So there's a lot of things that needs to be done at the same time. Our initial analysis, we profile the network and the systems, see what is still working, what not. File integrity, check some software. So what is very nice is some organizations do have a list of what is all the known files that should be on their organization servers. So if we've got a list like that, I can run it against their software and very quickly identify what's not supposed to be there. Also, if a company is compromised, it doesn't help if you're already hacked or some malware is running on your environment. If I arrive on the scene, I can't use your software to actually scan your environment because the malware already got past your best software. So we need to introduce better software or something else to actually detect what's running where. We also have a look at the bandwidth usage because the bandwidth usage will tell us whether there is data being exported from the environment or there's data, for example, that is being downloaded. One of the cases we actually did was a 40 gigabyte file was being transferred over the network, closed down the whole bandwidth. Client was very, very uncomfortable. They thought their data was leaking out. And when we arrived, we actually determined that it was 40 gigabyte that was transferred to them. So 40 gigabytes is also too big for a virus. When we analyzed it, we actually found that it was a crypto gig or crypto mining gig that was being downloaded to the environment. Traced it back, and it was their IT service providers, personnel, that downloaded a 40 gigabyte cryptocurrency mining gig to the environment, and they wanted to use the client's environment to do crypto mining, obviously without permission. So then also network baselining, see what is running where, which servers are acting in the wrong fashion. We want to look at the log retention policy because the log files will tell us exactly what happened. A lot of times companies are only recovering or retaining 7 days worth of log files or even less, 24 hours. If you listen to, sorry, I forgot your name. If you listen to the previous presenters, we see that a hacker can be on a system for up to 2 years. The FireEye Mandiant reviews of what's happening in Africa actually showed that on average, a hacker is on a system for 209 days. 209 days before he's detected. If we only store 25 hours worth of log files or 7 days worth of log files, there's no way that we'll be able to identify what he was doing on the system, what did he export out, how did he get in, when did he originally get in, those type of things. We want to see the event correlation through log to timeline analysis, for example, because if you're sitting with a firewall, you're sitting with servers, and we need to trace that person through the environment to see what they were doing. There is literally millions of events happening on that server. It's not just your actions. Everything is recorded in those log files. And we want to map out at the same time level to see exactly what's happening. A lot of times you'll also have servers in different time zones. And we need to bring that down so we can see something was done in America at 2 o'clock in the morning, what's happening in South Africa at the same time. Okay, so prioritization, we need to go through a process with the client to actually prioritize what should we be doing first. Obviously, we come in, we determine that there is an incident, we try to contain it, we try to see what exactly is going on, from where is it happening, can we stop it? But then you have to go through an effort with the client to say, okay, what's more important? Should we be repairing the financial system first? Should we be looking at the operational system? Maybe it's a manufacturing plant and all their designs and templates are being kept on a server. What is more important for them? So go through a process. Also, if I ask the IT people, what is their priority? That will differ greatly from if I talk to the financial director or if I talk to the CEO or to the operational director. Everybody's got a different what is most important in an organization. So we need to clarify exactly what we need to do, because if you're walking in with a team of 10 people and you need to assist the client and you start chasing all the rabbits and listening to all the bosses inside that organization, you're not going to achieve anything. We need to have structure and order when we do these type of exercises. Develop containment strategy of different scenarios. So do we disconnect from the environment? Do we shut down it? Do we just disable it? Potential damage to the theft of data. So, for example, if the ransomware started and it's running and we realize it's ransomware, do we stop the process or do we allow it to finish? Those are all the type of things that you need to consider. You can't just stop it, because if the files are already damaged, if your master boot record is also impacted, for example, file allocation tables, etc., we might not be able to get the data back. So if you allow it to run through and we do opt to pay the decryption or the ransom, then we won't be able to recover it if we stop the process. It's not always an exact science. Different software, different ransomware needs different decisions to be taken. So, but it is a consideration. Need for evidence preservation. Do we need to preserve evidence, or is it more important to just fix the system? System availability to users, time and the resources needed to implement the strategy. So, for example, if the client tells you, listen, we need to be up and running by Monday morning, then it's going to take a team of 50 people. But if they are prepared to have their financial system up by the Monday, and by the next Friday we can have the HR department repaired, then at least you're working with a plan and you know how many resources to implement. Duration of the solution, how long is it going to take us? We need to be speaking to the PR people. We need to be communicating to the personnel. We need to be communicating with clients to tell them, listen, how long is this delay going to happen? We saw that being done by the Joburg team very well, where they came out, they said how long they were going to be down, etc. And then also immediate containment versus delayed containment. Do we contain it now and lose the ability to investigate or trace the attackers, or do we close down and maybe not be able to trace them further? So typically during the process, these are the phases we're going through. Assessment of available information. We need to understand what we have. Instruction and acceptance. What's the objectives? Clarify the end result with the client. The review of the data collect prior to our arrival. So a lot of times when we arrive, they would have called in their own IT department. They would have taken certain steps. Now, I was speaking to one of my friends here in the break, where he said that some of the policies are being declined because the clients are taking too long to contact the insurer. They are appointing people on their own, etc. We are definitely seeing that. In one of the matters I'm currently working in, the external IT people was actually responsible for managing the whole security environment of the client. They failed to do upgrades on the firewall for more than 5 months. That is absolute, not acceptable and negligent. They were the cause of the whole breach. The client allowed them to come in, not knowing what the cause was. They did the original assessment. They realized it was their fault. They fixed it, and now they're refusing to actually give us the evidence that they are guilty, because their insurer has told them if they accept liability, they lose their insurance. So now the client is sitting with a situation, they can't prove that it was actually their own service provider who was at fault. And now, unfortunately, our clients in cyber insurance is also not paying out because of some technical situation. So it's a huge situation that we've run in there. So I don't think it's a wise thing to actually use your own IT or your own external IT service provider but it's going to happen in any case because that's the knee-jerk reaction. You quickly phone your IT people. Our technology installation, do we need to deploy certain tools? It's always good if we have a relationship with the client beforehand. If it's an organization like Standard Bank, for example, I can guarantee you if they are hacked and we need to deploy tools on the environment, it takes up to 3 months to get permission to deploy tools on the environment, because we can't just allow anything to be deployed on the environment. It could actually cause harm. It could be clashing with something else running on the environment. So typically we want to chat to a client beforehand and say, these are typically the type of tools we're going to use. If you are hacked, test them and pre-approve them that we are allowed to use them. Collection of the data, we want to search for the incident of compromises, want to secure evidence, we want to do additional data review on those, come up with a report in terms of what information was breached, what was leaked out, remedial steps, isolate the endpoints, monitor for recurrences, and then also advise the clients regarding going forward. So if we repair environment, what we're seeing with the ransomware is that in the beginning it executed immediate, nowadays it infects the backups as well. So if you think that you've got backups and you reinstall them, it can start that whole process running again. So when we repair environment, we get it healthy, we want to monitor that patient so that we can contain any new outbreaks that is happening. It sounds like we're talking about Corona, hey? Delete malware. Okay, so these are just some of the steps, eradication and recovery steps. Identify all affected hosts, delete the malware, disable compromised accounts, reset passwords. As they also said, in the previous matter we had, the criminals was actually on the environment. They created a false or a ghost employee account. Every time we send out a notification to have the passwords changed, the criminal was very friendly, said reset his password. Every time he got a new password. Fortunately, it wasn't us. It was this external IT guys that we were talking about. And 48 hours later, we actually came out and we saw, listen, you guys, they're still on your environment. Because somebody actually tried to uninstall the malware that was running. Okay, upgrade the components, get the new operating systems in, do your patch management, test and restore clean backups. We don't want to just restore a backup because it can be infected, so we need separate space to test it in. Harden the security measures, heighten your security monitoring for that period, at least after a breach, at least for a month. You have to heighten your security monitoring. Go through the lessons learned and then look at your evidence retention. Are we going to prosecute somebody? Do we later need to prove? So, for example, in some instances, we have to show that a person's information was not breached or that it was breached. We can have a situation in South Africa where a person can come and say, well, I'm suing an organization because my data was breached, and then in actual fact, it wasn't part of the information that was actually breached. So we need to retain that so that we can prove that later. So incident response, it is a chaotic environment that we walk in. It is a very stressful environment. In some instances, I've had the chairman of a board that was walking with me and said, Danny, if this comes out, we're going to lose $5 million. Danny, if this comes out and you don't fix it before that time, our share price is going to drop with $6 million. And I think about when we were about at 30 million, I said to him, listen, you're not helping at all. So you need to take control. You need to, in a very short time, get a handle on things and then work with a plan with the client to actually remediate that situation. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. That is luckily a question for the smart guys that can come in later. I'm not. I'm there to do the technical stuff. They tell me go or not to go. Ryan?
Thanks. That's a great question. So what we typically do is there are some initial investigation costs which are going to be incurred. So we would have deployed Danny and them to take a look and see what has actually happened. Those initial sort of costs, there's very frequent initial feedbacks to us we would be picking up as part of our initial sort of investigation type costs up to a certain limit. So there is that initial sort of confirmation cost that we were looking at as an insurer.
But also, just to manage that whole situation, we do try to quickly phone the client, talk to the IT guys. If we can log in remotely, we also do the remote logon. And we've had situations where we were able to establish exactly what's going on, that it's actually not a problem within less than 2 hours from being notified. So the cost of that whole assignment was less than 2,000 Rand. So, I think we try to manage it as good as possible. Okay. Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Danny. Really appreciate it. It's always very interesting to get some insights from Danny as to where the market is, what they're seeing happen, etc. Danny is going to be hanging around in the refreshment break, so if you do have any questions you want to post him at that point, please do feel free to go and have a chat to him. He is a fascinating guy. Speaking of which, that's a great segue into Lisa, who is not a fascinating guy, but she's a fascinating lady. So Lisa Swain from Weber Wenzel is going to give us a bit of a legal overview. I think you're in for a good treat. She is a very, very entertaining lady. So over to Lisa.
This block. Don't stand out of the square. Hi, everybody.
What? The clicker. Sorry, the clicker. Right, we're up. Just quickly, Candice and Tove, what a fantastic venue. Jeez, congratulations. This is really great. Okay, everybody, we're doing speed legal because everybody's taken up my time. So when I speak to brokers, my new thing now is there's no such thing as a broker. You're a risk manager. You need to be a lawyer. You need to be an insurer. You need to be a broker. And you probably also need to be a bit of a psychiatrist. It's hard to deal with clients now because the products are becoming more complex. Life is becoming more complex. The world is closing in on us. And in particular with cyber, really, it is all about money. And I always say you can get anything at a price. Cyber insurance is, some people think it's easy. I think it's a complex product. It's a complex risk. And what your clients definitely need to know is that there is a lot that a cyber product will not cover, ever. And so what I want to hopefully leave you with today is what you need to do with your clients to try and avoid liability on your part. Because unfortunately, the more insurers reject claims, the more brokers get sued, and you're kind of like becoming gynecologists. Nobody really wants to take on a broker PI risk. So it's not a good space to be in, and you need to manage your risk. So you're managing the risk of your clients and, very importantly, managing your own. So we've heard all about cyber attacks. That's why I say we're going speed legal here. Cyber attacks are happening all the time, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a concentrated effort on the part of the cyber criminal. They are generally opportunistic attacks that'll hit your client unintentionally. The NotPetya attack was a perfect example of that. It hit and grounded Maersk for 7 days, and the attack wasn't aimed at Maersk. It was just that Maersk were using particular software that was attacked in that hack. So it's not that your client says it's never going to happen to me because I'm not in that business. Well, you might be using software that is wanted by some cyber criminal or wanted to be accessed, or access wants to be gained by some cyber criminal, and so your client is attacked. And what your clients need to understand, insurance is a hard sell. It's harder to sell law and legal services, but insurance is a hard sell. And the more products we as insurance clients are having to take out, sorry, I know I'm looking at you around the corner, but I'm not allowed to step out of this box. I feel like I'm in court. What your clients need to understand is that you need to spend the money to get the protection, and you need as much protection as you can possibly get. You need to protect the risks that you need to protect, and you need to know that there are risks that will never be protected by insurance. Insurance is not a catch-all, so you need to educate your clients. But in order to educate your clients, you've got to educate yourselves. So one of the huge things with cyber at the moment is the devastating consequences, the amount of money that's involved. I was with a client 2 weeks ago in a boardroom in a not so happy situation. The client had been hacked, a very big company in South Africa, 180 million, not covered. The broker was attacked by the CEO in front of me. It was embarrassing for me, and it must have been absolutely awful for the broker. And the reason for the attack on the broker was, why didn't you tell me this wasn't covered by the policy? So when I say educate yourselves, first and foremost, know that policy inside and out. Know what is covered and what is not covered. But know the consequences of what is not covered. In this example, what was not covered was contractual liability. Most of our businesses run on contracts. Our liabilities and obligations that we assume in relation to our clients and our customers are contractual. Outside of those contracts, that liability doesn't exist. So, for instance, let's take Maersk, for example, Maersk being the shipping company. When it contracts with its clients, it contracts to ship goods from A to B. Outside of that contract, it doesn't have a legal liability towards its client. So if it suffers a cyber attack and all the systems go down and the containers are sitting out at sea and the ships are paying demurrage, which are penalties in maritime law, and your goods, my goods, I've bought goods, they need to arrive today, I've got to deliver them to my customers. You can see all the consequential loss that's coming after a cyber attack. None of that would be covered because all of those obligations are based in contract. So your clients need to understand that so that you don't get shouted at across a boardroom table in my presence when I'm telling the client that the loss is not covered. So your clients need to know what it is that we need, what kind of policy do we need, what kind of product do we need, and what is very importantly not covered. What are the limits of cover? What are the important aspects of cover? And in order to advise your clients properly, you really need to understand your client's business. What your clients need to know first and foremost, and you've heard it today with Junaid and Sol and Danny, that cyber risk and cyber security is a board thing. It starts at the top and it has to work its way down through the organization. It's not an IT issue. It comes from the board must direct it, the board must understand its risk, and that is why we have people like PwC, Cyanri. These are the people that your clients need to get in to assess their risk, because none of us really know. In a game of threats, there's no room for ego. And unfortunately, I've seen it in our space as well. The IT guys go, no, don't worry, we got this covered. We know exactly what we're doing. Not necessarily. You're also too close to the problem. In my view, it's better to get an independent outsider to conduct a risk analysis on the business. Until such time as your customers have conducted a risk analysis on their business, they don't know what their risk is. They don't know where the holes are to be plugged. And they don't know the extent of the insurance cover that they require. And if they don't know, how the hell are you supposed to know and advise them? So in an organization, you've heard Danny say it, you've seen PwC illustrate it for you. It's all about training people, creating awareness, and it's got to be continuous. Cyber criminals get cleverer and cleverer every second of every day. So, you know, it's like a really great pair of shoes. They don't seem to last long enough. Cyber policy is an annual thing. That's okay. But your cyber security measures, your customers' cyber security measures have to be monitored consistently all the time. When you renew the policy, don't just go through a rubber stamp renewal. Look at it again. Look at the business again. How have you grown? How have your risks changed? And learn that through your clients. That also creates an awareness in your clients. The other thing about the products, and when I say know your product well, is knowing what your product requires of the insured to continue to be insured. So the steps that you need to take. For example, Danny was saying a company suffers an attack, they get paid out, everybody sorts it out, but they don't fix the problem. So then they have another attack. You will always, if you remain vulnerable, you will be attacked again. Your insurance cover is not going to cover a second attack if you've done absolutely nothing to take steps to fix the problem that occurred that was the cause of the first attack. One of the great things about cyber policies is that is the first response part of it, the first response offering. For me, that's the most important thing, not because it includes legal services. I mean, I might not even be named on the policy, but it is your first response team. Danny is so right. For a company to have its own IT specialist respond first is probably the best thing to do at the time, but for that split second. It's not the best idea. It's always better, and that's where I say egos don't belong in this game. You need to get an independent specialist in. So first and foremost, attack. Hopefully the company is now, the security is up and running. PwC's gone through it. Danny's advised. And the minute an attack happens, that computer system starts sounding alarms. The IT people go crazy. They know they've been attacked. What do? I'm not here to sell iTOO products, but I particularly know it. No, they're not paying me. I wish they would. Warwick, I've got a Porsche in mind. No? Okay. See? The iTOO hotline. Unless all of you perfectly professional, fantastic, expert risk managers are available 24/7 to your clients, 365 days a year, your clients need that iTOO hotline, because most of the attacks happen after hours and at Christmas time. So you might not be contactable. Your clients need to know to call the IT hotline. When they call the IT hotline, the specialists will be brought in. The policy covers those costs. Use it. They are experts that have been carefully selected by the insurers for that very purpose. Why involve your service providers? Why involve your own IT people? It's going to create conflict, as Danny's example probably illustrated very well. It's better to get the outsiders in, and ASAP. You need to manage media. You need to manage the legal stuff. All of those people will be called in. It'll be arranged. You don't have to lift a finger. You need to manage your client and manage the process. And very importantly, a lot of these things in policies require upfront consent by the insurers. Please don't forget that. In the whirlwind of stress and panic after an attack, just remember, a lot of things require prior written consent from the insurer. So when you go away, go put prior written consent on all your whiteboards, because it's amazing how many people forget to ask that. And then after the fact, the broker comes to me and says, but hold on, why do I have to ask for consent? Surely the minute I notify the claim, that's me asking for consent. No. Don't you know? Insurers are anal about words. When they say we need you to get prior written consent, that's exactly what they mean. There's no implication. There's no alternative. That's what they want. They stick to their wording. They're also not Father Christmas. So manage your clients' risks. Know your products inside and out. That contractual exclusion for me is one of the most important things. Liability outside of the contract, perfectly covered. Liability stemming only from the contract, like a normal, let's take a cell phone provider. Cell phone provider contracts with all of its customers to deliver all your mobile phones by 15 December before Christmas. Cyber attack hits the mobile service providers' systems, and all of those deliveries, all of the records, all of the schedules, everything just goes out of sync. No one knows what's happening. Deliveries are delayed. Us as customers are going to have a heart failure. I want my delivery. Right, cyber attack. I've got the cell phone provider says, insurer, I want to be paid because one, the attack has cost me a whole lot of money because I've got all these claims coming in from my clients. My clients can't deliver mobile telephones if I'm a store to their customers. They've suffered loss of income. All of these claims are coming against us. We want to be insured. We want to be covered. And insurer says, hold on, all of that liability is contractual. You didn't owe anybody a duty in law outside of the contract, so none of that is covered. So what your clients need to know is that when they say, I don't need cyber insurance, or it'll never happen to me, one, yes, it'll happen to you. And two, yes, you do need insurance, even if it only does cover some of the stuff. Cyber attacks are incredibly costly. Your client is going to have to bear the brunt of those costs itself and hopefully have cover in relation to the others. And that's where you come in. You need to educate your clients, and you need to know so much about their business that you can get them the correct insurance that they need, so as to avoid PI claims coming at you, and they come hard and they come fast. So it's not fun. And yes, Poppy is coming in as an April Fool's joke, 1 April 2020. The Cyber Crimes and Securities Bill is still in the process. Data protection is the one thing that a policy does cover very nicely, because that's your legal duty and that's very important. And every client, just think, Virgin Active Gym, they got all our data. Do they have a cyber policy? Don't know. Probably could do with one. Thank you. Any questions? Excellent. You're all experts. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lisa. We must give her a longer list of companies to mention at the end to try and sell some policies too. So next time, if brokers want to sort of submit a bit of a hit list, and we can get Lisa to call them out online, and we'll get all of them to come and buy some cyber policies. Great plan. Next up, I've got Caroline Smith, who's going to come and present on PR and the public relations element. So Caroline, if you want to start making your way up. Fantastic. Here already. I'll be honest, when I first started getting into the cyber insurance thing, I looked at the PR element as being a little bit fuzzy on the inside. And I'm like, okay, well, that's all nice and warm and fuzzy and stuff. But there have been so many incidents on a global perspective, and we started to see locally as well, where if you get that PR element wrong, it really comes back to bite you. So it's that bit that you really kind of instill a bit of confidence in your clients that they still want to deal with you, manage your reputational damage. And if you chat to your clients, it's the one thing that they are petrified of is, I don't want to be the guy on the front of News 24 or have carte blanche knocking on my door because we've been compromised. So I think listen up, the PR side is really pivotal to a cyber insurance policy and something that you do want to get right. So without further ado, Caroline, if you want to grab the mic, if you can just block for the streaming.
Right, trapped. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I want to introduce my colleague Alison, who is going to do the other half of this presentation, because I also know when to hire an expert, and Alison is the expert in this. And I'm not an expert at working clickers. Oh, there we go. Right. Okay. So here's the thing. Why even have communications? You've listened to endless stories about words that I don't even know what they mean, firewalls, and I can't remember any of the others because they went straight out of my mind. So isn't that the most important thing? Why does communications matter? And communications is easy. Everybody talks every day. It's stuff you do yourself. The thing is, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So considering communications in your preparation mix just makes you feel safer. Nobody ever diarizes a crisis. We all know it happens when you're not expecting it. The news, especially with social media in the mix, will move far faster than you can control it. And you're going to be busy doing something else. You're dealing with the breach. You don't have time to communicate about the breach at the same time as fix the breach. So brand corrosion, the impact of brand corrosion is really real. One small indication that you have inefficient IT systems means you have an inefficient company. Even if nothing is exposed of your client's information and none of your systems are impacted, you still run reputational risk. Message engineering and management is in fact a specialist science. It's not as easy as it looks. And you need to understand the media. You need to understand how to engage on social media versus mainstream media and you don't have time to learn because you're dealing with a breach. Finally, you need to have a proactive and reactive engagement strategy. Not finally. And the other thing is that if you hire a specialist, they've got the journalist's contact details and personal relationships. You really do not want to be Googling Jeremy Maggs while Jeremy Maggs is busy Googling you. Okay. And now you understand where your vulnerabilities lie. Experts understand they have the systems and tools to handle your vulnerabilities. So now I'm going to hand over to Alison.
Hey guys, hello. Which is the button I press? That one. Right. Hi. So everybody, there's only ever two kinds of crisis. In what we're speaking about here this morning in our personal lives, at home, at work, in the office, in the traffic, there's only ever two kinds of crisis. And we know how to handle both of them. To give you a bit of background, you have a Python crisis, right? It's a slow, encroaching, predictable one that creeps up on you, wraps itself around you, and slowly strangles you until there's nothing left of you. Very, very, very dangerous. But you can see it coming. If you've got your wits about you, you can kind of suss it out and you handle it before you're out of breath and lying there and the python's swallowing you. These are the breaches, and this is the attacks that you can see coming, right? You know it's happening. You know, like the kind of thing that happened to Mark Zuckerberg. You know it's going to happen. There's going to be fallout in the media. Somebody's going to find out about this. We can see it happening. Whoa, I've switched it off. Switched it back on. The other kind of crisis is a Mamba crisis. Strikes you, out of the blue. You have no idea, just one day you wake up, the Mamba's up and it's bitten you. Right. Most of the crises in the world, actually, are Python crises. You know, you kind of are eating the pork fat off the chop every day for 20 years. You're not going to the gym. You're smoking 20 cigarettes a day. Suddenly you have a heart attack. Not a Mamba crisis. No. It's a Python. It's a Python crisis. That's what it is. Right. Mamba crisis happens all of a sudden. Mamba crisis when your 10-year-old is riding his bike outside in the garden, falls off, breaks his arm. Boom. Then you've got to deal with it. Also very, very dangerous. A Mamba will rise up and kill you as quickly as you can imagine. You've got to be prepared for both of them. It doesn't help to have a Python remedy for a Mamba crisis and a Mamba remedy for a Python crisis, right? And that's what we do. From a comms point of view, that's what you're buying when you get this insurance. Right, so these are the hello surprise breaches, huh? Yeah. Data attacks, right there. Your Python crisis, to run through it very quickly, demands full disclosure of the issue or problem to the communications team from the very start. And if we're on board with you before it happens, you're going to need to trust us to say, Caroline, Alison, there's this thing that we're worried about. Could be happening. Hopefully it won't. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Well, you can see this thing happening. We'll get busy and we'll start. I keep pressing the wrong button. We'll get busy and we'll start putting a plan in place to help you so that if it does, we've got it sorted from a reputation, from a brand, from a comms point of view. This disclosure includes all of these things that you could read. You've got to tell us the full history of the matter. You've got to disclose all of your realities, giving us details about all your pertinent policies. How did this happen? What is your biggest fear? What is the best case outcome? What is the worst case outcome? What steps have you taken so far? Because when people and journalists and your clients and your social media audiences start asking these questions, we've got to have these answers. Otherwise, every time there's a question asked that doesn't have an answer, what happens? Your brand dies and is compromised a little bit more. And the implications on that down the line for your ability to attract more clients, to carry on being profitable, to keep on paying salaries, putting roofs over heads and food on plates becomes compromised. It's not okay. Nobody wants that. You've got to look after your brand from the very beginning, before the crisis strikes. Remember, it's a Python. We can see it coming, huh? We can handle it if we can see it coming. We need to allow it a leadership approach and workshop the best and worst case scenarios. Now I'm going to press the right button. Right. The communication commodities, which is basically just the staff that we're going to put together to help you before it happens or as it starts unfolding, includes these things. And you can read the list. There's all sorts of tools we have at our disposal. You oaks, you know about, we don't know much about data breaches and cyber attacks and stuff like that, but we know how to put a good message together and how to get it to the right people to reassure them. You're going to tell us what that message is. We're going to counsel you. This is the right thing to do. This is not the right thing to do. Maybe consider expressing it this way. Don't just phone up to the newspaper. And if the newspaper or the TV station or the digital media phones up to you, don't say, I've got no comment. Don't say that. Huh? All right, you want holding statements, Q&A documents, media releases, internal comms. Internal is as important as talking to Morning Live. Right button? Yes. Right. That's a Python crisis. We'll help you with it. What if the mamba bites you? Huh? I've been bitten by a mamba. Boom. What do? You've got to be fast. And what Lisa said to you earlier is these things happen on New Year's Eve. They really do. It happened to us last year, New Year's Eve, suddenly, or Christmas Eve, or somewhere between Christmas and New Year. You're on a beach somewhere in Plettenberg Bay. We're not, huh? Yeah. It's an emergency situation, and you need an emergency response that does a couple of things. It establishes you, my friend, as the primary, most reliable and honest source of news and information. So people aren't getting their information about what's happening to your business and the businesses of your clients from Jeremy Maggs or from Toby Shapshank or from whoever is now loading things up onto Twitter. What the hell is happening? This is, I ordered my phone and it's Christmas tomorrow and it hasn't come. And that domino effect of brand impact coming from you. It's not coming from people who are malingerers and unhappy. It gives you a central resource that holds and manages information, reporting responses, and critical contact people. So we're handling that. We've got it. We are on the line to Danny all the time. What is happening? We are formulating those answers, getting them out there, reassuring people, I've got this. We're cool. This is a bad thing that's happened to us. People who know what they're saying know what they're doing. This is an assumption of all humanity. It's why we trust our moms when we're 6 months old. And your Mamba anti-venom also puts you and your spokespeople at the center of the various parties needing information and getting information. So the information isn't coming from someone else. It's not coming from the hacking team. It's not coming from people who think they understand the dark web. It's not coming from somebody who is a disaffected, pissed off client. It's coming from you. We know what's going on here. Even if we don't really, even if you've got Danny working like a crazy person over there, the message is, we've got this. We're cool. Huh? Your brand's feeling a lot more comfortable. You've bought yourself breathing space. It's worth investing in. All right, so let's have a quick look at the Mamba crisis. Not going to spend a lot of time. If you have a hack over here, I'm not allowed out of the box. Hey? If you have a hack here, within 30 minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to get you your media release, your holding statement. We're going to get it written, approved, and issued within 30 minutes. And don't let that scare you. It's not this is the full thing that's happened and this is what the implications are. Often it can be 50 words. We're aware of the problem. We're onto it. We're handling it. Don't worry. There it is. But there's a vacuum of information. You're starting to fill it up. Within 2 hours, we set up a comm center, a crisis comm center, where we get everything. So we have our crisis comms team in reporting, in attendance. We have a hotline for queries, feeding information through to people who are asking, posting the social media content. The info is coming through to us. We're repurposing it. We're making it palatable and digestible for your various audiences. We're monitoring media all the time, without stopping. We're amplifying whatever we've got on the social media. We're handling that community engagement. We're doing all of this. You're dealing with your Mamba bite. Huh? We're telling your family in the waiting room, don't worry, everything's going to be cool. And at resolution, we evaluate the success of the intervention. We put an analytical report together and we adjust it for next time that it happens, next time the Mamba ups and bites you. All right, at the same time, you have to deal with your internal stakeholders. You've got clients, you've got staff, you've got somebody who you bank with, for example, is saying, what's going to happen now? You aren't getting this contract. We're dealing with them internally as well. So we understand the daylight between the internal and the external audiences and where those messages need to come together to serve them. So that your brand, which is the master of everything, emerges from this at the end as unscathed as possible. And there's the timeline also. All the time, until it's over, until we've recovered, until it's been fixed. There's a quick spokesperson chain of command. We put that in place as soon as possible. So somebody on the ground is going to see something's happened here. Something's not okay. What are we going to do? They speak to your IT engineers, your software forensics. It goes up and up and up until finally we have a designated spokesperson that engages media. So you don't have Linda in HR, or Sarah in the call center talking to IT Web, talking to News 24. So the person at the top who's talking to journalists and who's formulating the messaging and getting it out there is the person who's holding it together. In PR, we talk about singing from the same hymn sheet. We all sing the same song. You don't have 3 or 4 songs going on all over the place because that's just a muddle. And then what happens to your brand? Mamba venom starts creeping in. There's 6 R's of crisis comms messaging that we can speak to you about if and when we're ever needed, but it starts with reacting. 10-year-old falls off the bike. Oh, baby, have you hurt yourself? You react instantly before you respond. Oh, good heavens, is that so? We need to get you to Dr. Reno. I'm sorry this has happened to you. Not this is my fault. I should have watched you riding your bicycle. I'm a bad mother. No, this is a bad thing that's happened. I'm going to fix it. That's what regret means. I'm sorry this has happened. Not, it's my fault that this has happened. Research, how did this happen? What were you doing? Were you going too fast down the driveway? I've told you not to do that. Whatever. Retribution or recompense, what we're going to do to make it better. And this is how we're going to go forward to make sure it doesn't happen again. The 6 R's of crisis comms. We prioritize your audiences. So first, the first people that we speak to all the time are the people who most directly affected. Vodacom, who's waiting for Lisa's shipments of cell phones. They're the guys we speak to first. Look, this is what's happened. There's a problem. We're doing our best to sort it out. Vodacom thinks, well, that's cool. They're speaking to us, right? The money part of it, that's something you're going to have to deal with another time. But if you're speaking to someone, we all know, if something bad happens, this is what happened, darling, I'm sorry. He fell off his bike. I shouldn't have been, whatever I was doing, I should have been watching him. Whatever. Tier 2, we speak to your employees, the forensic staff, suppliers and partners, and Tier 3 to the media. Remember, this is messaging, this is conversation, this is not fixing the actual problem. You guys are there fixing the problem. All right. Prioritize audiences. That's what we'll do. You have a problem? Got this. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Alison. Great news is we're headed into a break. So just 3, 4 quick things from my side. First one, I don't know if you guys are aware, but today is actually International Safer Internet Day. So that's something to ponder and think about. Second one, that's where we're going. There is a hashtag, if you can maybe just tweet about the event and stuff. So there is some stuff that's already been posted. Third one, I don't know if you guys saw the IMAX Experience Room. I don't know if I'd call it IMAX, but the Experience Room. Maybe pop past there, check out a couple videos and stuff. And then we'd also like to invite you guys to come up, and we're going to be signing on the wall. So during the break, grab a whiteboard marker, not the permanent marker that's in your handbag or in your pocket, and come have a sign on the wall. We're going to head into a break now. If I can ask you guys to be back at 25 to 12, that would be awesome. And we'll carry on from there. Thank you. Right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the break. Come back feeling very refreshed and ready to carry on. So we've spent a bit of time now looking at some of the elements of an incident response process. We're going to take a slight step to the side now. I've got Dwayne Nickel from Mimecast, who's going to come and tell us a little bit about what we can do to better secure the wetware as such. So you've heard about hardware, you've heard about software, but quite often the wetware is where the big risk lies. So wetware, unfortunately, is you and I as we sit here, and we are a massive risk to an organization. So I'd like to call up Dwayne to please come and educate us on what we can do to better secure the wetware within our companies.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Dwayne Nickel. I'm from Mimecast. I'm from Cape Town. I'm not a vegan, so please I don't need those comments. I don't have a top knot. I do say brew and like a lot, so if I do get a bit much in my presentation, please forgive me. What's fascinating about this morning is that we had a multitude of different subjects, but nearly everyone left me with a message personally, and everyone said something around awareness or cyber awareness or security awareness, which I thought was quite fascinating, and it definitely makes my job way more pressure. So we'll kick off just around a couple of things. My presentation isn't that long, so it shouldn't be the full 30 minutes, but really what it's aiming to is, since I've taken on the role at running our security awareness program at Mimecast, I also run our brand protection services at Mimecast for the Middle East and Africa region. It's been a fascinating world, right? I mean, I've been engaged into a lot of enterprise customers who deal with lots of stuff around human error. And unfortunately, also the same thing that I've heard multiple times this morning, our humans are our biggest risk. I take a completely different stance on that. I think humans are our biggest asset. But by sharing things like compliance and governance frameworks in a world of a connected service and networks does not engage any person at any business at any level, right? I still ignore all my CISO's emails. Chris, don't tell Mark. But that's just the reason, right? People don't get engaged in content, and they don't really understand this weird world that kind of we as individuals here might see. But at a grassroots level, from the office manager right up to middle management, this isn't the world they live in. They've got sales quotas, they've got marketing deadlines, etc. So I've coined this term as configuring the human firewall. Mimecast started talking about this human firewall about 4 years ago, Chris, and it was around a product that we released, and it was quite a new way of thinking, this human kind of element in terms of security and how we can better kind of engage our users as our customers and give them the right tools to identify what dangers live in the internet, in the big bad world today. So the first thing I want to show everyone here is, this is the only technical slide, so please don't fall asleep just yet. I promise you it gets better. I know what I'm doing. Right, so the network. You look at anyone, is anyone here in network security specific for the organization? This is going to be a weird presentation then. But the network, right? So these are the guys you've got an IT team for. Guys are putting tons of effort into this. And let's imagine for a second, all of us here are part of a brand new startup, right? We're all part of this IT team that doesn't exist today. This is the task in front of us. Someone's going to run our network. Someone's going to run our security. Someone's going to run our connectivity. Everything goes into this. And this is going to be the start of this incredible business we're all about to launch. Do the people in this room think we put the same amount of effort into this organizational chart? So the diagrams look quite similar, and I always argue with, unfortunately, it's always the guy at the top of this hierarchy, that we obviously put so much into our network security and our firewalls, but do we put the same amount around security awareness specifically into this organizational chart? And I'd argue no. So to configure, put everything together, steer the ship in the same route, have everyone paddling in the same direction, much, much harder than we think it is, right? All the animation I did, so you can clap later. But when you look at the network, look at all the things we go through. And I mean, I'm by no means a network specialist, but this is just what I could think of what we think about when we look at configuring a brand new network. But when we configure people, we really only configure them to our organization's requirements, right? So we think of the HR stuff. Welcome to my company. Please take this anti-bribery and sexual harassment course and you'll be, right? You got your regular induction programs, go through all this stuff, learn our products. You've got the service training, and then the culture, which is the most important. What does our company believe? What's our set of values, etc.? But really, at no point does anyone introduce security awareness unless it's part of the culture. So let's look at the real world that we live in today, right? It's this little big blue and green thing that we all call home. And unlike Greta Thunberg would say, it's probably not going to last another 10 years, which it probably will, maybe 10 billion years. But we don't live in this world anymore. We live in the new world. And the new world is flooded with bad stuff, isn't it? It's flooded with nation states bragging about how they use the ransomware attack to steal loads of money to kind of fund a nuclear program at a country level. It's filled with fake news. If anyone ever starts any sentence to you saying, I read on Facebook that, either punch them in the face or just to completely ignore what they're saying. Fake news is probably the biggest threat vector that we see at Mimecast. It's becoming more and more harder to define what is news and what isn't. And it's even more harder to define that the news site that you're currently reading is even a real one that's not nation state sponsored. We've even got the Kardashians to fight. So, how do we get to utopia? What is this perfect state in the world that we're kind of all aiming for? There's one main problem. First of all, utopia does not exist. In our world of security and security awareness and data security, there is no end game that you can fight for. A lot of customers ask me, Dwayne, will I have to take an awareness program for a year or 2 years? No, you're going to have to take it forever, okay? Why? Because today's threats are looking nowhere near like what we're going to be facing tomorrow. So there is no utopia, but there is a solution that we can constantly utilize. So I want to step back a little bit. I was recently doing a multi-choice, had a really great event in Cape Town, and I was speaking, but one of the guys that spoke was an animator from a company called Sea Monster. Has anyone heard of this business before? No one. Okay, this is a really cool story. It's a small SME company in Woodstock in Cape Town, the kind of perfect place for get coffee and vegans. But Sea Monster has an incredible business proposition to its customers. And one of their biggest customers is one of the biggest companies in the world, is ArcelorMittal. So ArcelorMittal had this problem, and Sea Monster thought with their revolutionary software and services, they could tackle this problem. And the problem is that they were hiring people at an incredible rate, but staff turnover was ridiculous because, hey, I can do this job. But as soon as they throw them into an environment where you look at like being 300-400 meters up the ground or down the ground, large amounts of noise and stress in your environment, the guys crumble under the stress and then they leave. That's dangerous, right? Because why does that not work for the company? Because you've just lost 3 months of productivity and you've got to start the whole cycle all the way. So much so that 76% of the company was like in that specific job role was leaving every 3 months. That's a major problem for any company, right? So what these guys did is they kind of generated with using virtual reality and kind of large scale artificial intelligence to build out a program where guys would use virtual reality and then have to climb on bidirectional ladders. Really cool. You'd actually be in one place, but you'd be climbing up to 300 meters in the air. It'd be a massive amount of noise and stress and people throwing hammers at you and like being kicked in the chest and like all these mad things going on. But what was it doing? It was introducing a completely new version 2.0 of configuration by introducing stress into people's ability to see what they need to do to be able to complete a task, right? It was gauging their aptitude. Were you telling me you can do this and then really couldn't do it? It's also provided a multitude around testing. You want to test people. You want to figure out, am I giving you enough information so when I ask you a question, you can answer it appropriately? Not correctly, appropriately, because things are changing. The correct answer today might be the incorrect answer tomorrow. But really what it came down to was what Michael Madden, who's the founder of the service that we offer to customers as security awareness around intelligence. Everyone talks about data being the new oil today. I don't fully agree with that statement, but data is vitally important. Why? Because it gives us an incredible glimpse into the future based on patterns and years of things growing, right? If you look at our business, like a listed company, we don't go to the analyst and say we're going to grow by 19,000% next year. That would be crazy, right? I mean, it would be amazing, but it's probably not going to happen. So we use data to gather that information. But information is just as bad. Because if I tell you that your network's terrible and all your users are your biggest risk, cool, I'll just take my sleeping pattern from 4 hours a night as a CISO to 2 hours. It doesn't help me. But changing the information into intelligence, this is what you can do with this information. This is how we can apply it in your organization's context. That becomes really powerful. So, has anyone been privy to a fish test at their companies here that they know of? Because sometimes you're not supposed to know. Okay. So phishing, for me, I don't fully appreciate and I don't really agree with because I don't see the full benefit of making someone click on something. And I'll prove you, I'll give you 2 examples of why this is easy. Huh? It's pretty cool. I did that. So if you look at traditional fish testing, endless templates. Log in here to Apple, log into your OneDrive account here. Oh my gosh, there's a bevy of assets at my IT administrator's disposal that he can catch us out with. But the problem is that it's literally turned into a witch hunt, okay? And I'll tell you why. So I sit at all our enterprise clients and they go, geez, we did a fish test. My goodness, it was amazing. Caught like 80% of guys. What did you send them? No, we just told everyone they're getting retrenched. Sorry, what? In the world we live in the economy we live in South Africa, you tell a guy he's going to get retrenched and he needs to click on one of these 3 links to see what his package is going to be. Of course you're going to get a high click rate. But if you told him, this is a true story, by the way. This guy actually got the 4-letter word, starts with F, ends with Aya. He got fired because this was his methodology. The first thing he did was he ran this retrenchment campaign. Sent to the company-wide, you're all getting retrenched. Sorry, economy's flat. We're all dying, terrible. And then 2 weeks later, he did some training. So he took the entire company of 518 people into a big boardroom in Cape Town at the ICC. And for an hour, he spoke about the dangers of phishing. 2 weeks later, he then sent the prince. Someone spoke about the prince from Nigeria sending the email, and no one clicked on it. And he was like, look how good my security awareness program was. It's like, well, not really. Because these people are emotional pieces of meat, right? There's so many things going on in our minds. We don't look at everything the same. There's 100 people here. Everything, if I showed every single person the exact same thing, we'd have different emotional contexts, we'd have different emotional reactions. You can't play on people's emotions when you fish them, because it's not real. That's you looking for a witch hunt, and you're looking to burn them at the stake. Please don't burn any employees. Someone did speak about this morning, though. You don't want to see your company, whether you're the office manager or the CEO, this is something you don't want to see on a Monday morning just after you've made your coffee, right? And believe me, these typical people offices exist all over South Africa. The one thing that I must is the PR agency still here, because I'm going to contentiously disagree. The media, unfortunately, takes a victim of a cyber attack and turns them into another word that starts with a V, a villain. And I hate that, right? They want to sell newspapers and media. That's the end of the story, right? You've been hacked. Look at how terrible this breach was. Millions of records leaked. And it's this poor guy sitting at the back end, like it's affecting everyone. We were just the guys that got caught out today. And it's a very, very precarious position to be in as a CEO or a company's leader or anyone in that company, for example's sake, because really you shouldn't be portrayed as that. You coming out of the information, you look at Liberty, Dave Munro came out and stated that this has happened and he took control of the media messaging, which I thought was quite admirable. But at the end of the day, 5%, 1.5 billion rand or whatever it was down on their market cap, it still happened. Like, it doesn't really affect you either way, the way in which you control these messages. So this is the most dangerous thing that we see. I think we've gone over this a couple of times today. Hacking is happening everywhere in the world. It's more dangerous than it's ever been. The problem is that now, while it might be someone like me who's a previous white hat hacker and once upon a time hacked 1,312 people's bank details in a train station, but it doesn't matter. I digress. But you know how easy it is today to become a hacker. I don't need a master's degree in computer sciences or a theoretical degree from Cambridge on astrophysics. It doesn't exist anymore because the toolkits are open source to the user base. You can even choose which companies to attack and which products you want to use. And all the tutorials sit live on YouTube. Go take your pick. You can do anything you want. I did this for my thesis when I was doing mine, and it was so simple. I put up big posters this size in a train station and literally said, log into free Wi-Fi, took control of everyone's phone, and then logged into everyone's bank and stole 1 rand. It wasn't as great when the Hawks approached me, but I mean, again, we digress, right? I did get an A for my thesis, and everyone lost 1 rand. So what does it take, right? So I don't really like fear-mongering because it's more a reality. The world is terrifying, right? And it's not just terrifying for us here as business leaders or people in IT or in just business general. It's dangerous for anyone. For me, the worst part of attack is that people take advantage of uneducated and old people, and it literally boils my blood when you see how these things work. Big retailer recently had a problem. Someone faked their brand, put on a website and said, pay me $650. You can walk into any of our stores and you can do a 2-year internship and we'll pay you $5,000 a month. And 2,000 people across the nation walk into their stores. That's a huge problem, okay? In 2 ways. People who don't have the money spent the money because it gives the hopeless some hope. And this brand, who's one of the most recognized brands in the world, has this major problem to deal with, even though it wasn't their problem, technically. So we look back at this Fish 2.0, right? And this is a little bit technical, but bear with me because it's easy to understand. Instead of the usual templates that we get today, everyone here in this room has some form of email, probably more than 2 or 3 email addresses. And we all get spam and we get viruses. We kind of know what to look out for. We do. Okay? But we're not talking about us here. We're talking about the general population at our organization. So what Mimecast has developed is a way to look at the real way in which your organization is being attacked, right? So instead of the guy who sends retrenchment emails, what we're looking at is, if you are the FD of the company, what does the email look like that's coming through to you, okay? If we know that this email or this piece of messaging is dangerous, we'll remove that danger, which our products already do, and send it on to that FD as a genuine attack, all right? And then monitor what that FD does with that piece of information. Does he interact? Does he open the email? Could this potentially have brought the company down, essentially, in terms of what his interaction entailed? This is far more real-world intelligence. Why? Because it's using stuff that are actively hitting you as an organization, and it gives us insights to allow us to train our other customers, because we'll now know what kind of attacks these FDs or these CEOs are honestly getting. We call that real-world simulation. Does anyone see a problem with that picture? The web address. Okay. So you were right, so now you have to explain what it says. Okay. So the problem with this is this was a live attack I figured out about a year ago. I mean, if you look at the address bar side, that looks like is anyone using 365 here? I'm sure everyone in the world is. But that looks pretty legit, right? But hey, I looked at that. Problem is you got the email, you've already clicked on the link, your company's already broken. So this is too late anyway. But people go, look, I noticed it. Okay, that's fine. Hackers don't use this. There's tools that I can use that change it to that, right? That does not say login.microsoftonline.com. There's things called like hieroglyphs. There's things called homoglyphs or non-westernized characters, where that O might be a P in Greek, for example, right? And hackers know that they can make it look quite similar, but that it all doesn't say what we're looking for. And this is the level that we need to train our users at. Can you imagine the mountain of work ahead of us to get them to this level? But don't worry, there is a solution. Okay. In the 19 months I've run this product for Mimecast, I've been all over the world and I've spoken to many customers, and I just literally want to get some context. These are the things when I go to customers, I ask them to give me 5 or 6 people, just general users, general employees, bring them to the meeting. And then before they go into the meeting, I give them no context and say, define training for me at this company. On my word blog, this is the 5 words that we get the most. Stupid. I mean, how do you deal with an employee who thinks the training path that you take on, this is one of the big banks in the Middle East, is stupid, okay? Training, stupid, okay? This is most certainly not the case. But if you look at and you ask them what it should be, the best word here I always find is incentivized. I want to make money to be smart. This is quite different because people want to engage with content. They don't want it to be long, drawn-out, classroom-based where they get guys like me in for 3 hours. I decline these. I promise you. I've been asked by a lot of customers, can you come do security awareness training? Okay, what's the agenda? No, it's just you talking about the dangers of it for 4.5 hours. Interesting. If I'm not interested, your users are not going to be interested, right? We also find that characters are incredibly important in delivering any kind of messaging. And who does character creation well? Advertising, right? They create characters that we remember, that we constantly kind of look to see and what's this word? Interact with, etc. when we think about it. And look how good some of these characters are. So that when I say it's not inside, it's on top, you all say, yes. Haven't advertised on TV in 30 years. Does anyone here use Gromora? But you know exactly what you're thinking of. And if I said it's not dry, but you can drink it? All alcoholics, huh? Also, 10 years since you've last seen Barry Hilton's fluffy hair playing the banjo, but you remember it because that brand has been ingrained in your mind. And glug, glug, glug? Well done. Okay. I thought that was a difficult one, but clearly I was completely mistaken. Sasol today is like an enormous business-to-business company. They don't really deal with consumer. They've got a very small consumer footprint. But we all remember the 5-year-old little boy playing with his Ferrari in his little fake full station and his grandma saying, "Ach, seker nie ver nie." And that's amazing because these brands have continued to be recognized and thought about on a major scale So much so that about 3 months ago, I walked into Santon just around by the ENS building, and I looked at the youngest person I could find on the street and said, "It's not inside, it's on top." And she went, "Cremora." I was like, "Okay," and I just walked away. But she didn't even have a, she's 20, probably 20 years old. She's probably never even seen the ad, but she immediately put the brand together with the context. And this is why when you look at creating content and adding your users to an engaging experience, you've got to start looking at tying it to people and characters, because this is how people want to consume content, in a micro-learning fashion and with something that's funny, right? There's 2 ways to teach people, humor and fear. I don't want to walk around with a hammer anymore. Okay, I'm tired of hitting people on their hands when they break stuff. But this is that viral explosion of content. This is what people engage with, and it's been such an incredible breath of fresh air to see the stats around our customers completely going crazy for this stuff. We're like a 16,000 user business has a 91% engagement rate, and I'm like, has anyone else read your security policy at the company? There's 2 answers to that question. Has anyone at your company read your security policy? First answer, laughing. Second answer, no. Okay. So like when Harry met Sally, Mimecast introduced itself to this company called iTOO. And iTOO was this company we bought from this American guy, Michael Madden, who spent 35 years in military intelligence. And he was sitting at the Pentagon one day and he watched himself deliver security training, like I'm kind of doing to you guys today. And the next round of spies for the NSA and the CIA were present, and all of them were on their phones and listening to music and not paying attention. And he thought to himself, how ignorant would companies be if I'm sitting here with security-minded individuals and they are not paying attention? How naive would I be to think that companies are getting their employees to do the same thing? That sunk in. To kind of give you a flavor of what we believe content should look like, I've actually included one of the videos. They take about 93 minutes, so we won't keep you too much longer. Just kidding, it's 2.5. Don't get angry. And then you'll kind of see what we're trying to portray in a very lighter approach, and I'll give you some of the stats at why it's been successful afterwards. Oh, we got no sound.
Oh yeah, he just wants me to send some money to one of our competitors. Boss is my go-to guy. Yeah. Claire. $18,000. That's big money. Let's do it. Hold on. There's something about that subject line that seems odd. Part of the email from Hunter seems pretty straightforward to me. No, this is your time to shine. Let's pay the people. Not until we have more information. Account number, routing number, amount, it's all right there. Let me see. We need to make sure that this actually came from Hunter. It could have been sent from a dummy account. Okay, no need to resort to name calling. Look at the email. Having a great time in Cabo, beautiful beaches, lots of sun, never want to leave. That could have been written by anyone who knows that Hunter's in Cabo. Just call him to confirm. Just let him enjoy his time away. Doug, Hunter's counting on you. You sent $18,000.
And you just sent $18,000. I'm gonna close my eyes and imagine we're still on the beach. Gentle breeze blowing, frozen cocktail in hand. You like daiquiris, Doug?
I drink them almost exclusively.
You know how many daiquiris you can get for 18 grand?
Please don't make me do math.
Figure $9 a pop. That's 2,000 drinks.
So this email I allegedly sent.
Yeah, it should be in your inbox. I forwarded it to you.
An important email from Hunter. It's an odd subject line.
Not really.
How did you know I was in Mexico? Having a great time in Cabo, beautiful beaches, lots of sun, never want to leave.
Sounds like a lovely place.
It sounds like my Facebook stats. They literally lifted this from my page. I let the entire world know I was on vacation.
I like to think I had a hand in that.
An idiot.
Hey, there is only room for one idiot in this village, and I was here first.
Did anyone see what the mug said on his desk? World's okayest boss. It's my favorite mug in the world. So with the introduction of our awareness training program, what I'm amazed by is the actual importance of how people actually looked at the content and then included this into their existing ecosystem of services to their end users. So I haven't updated this slide probably for about 2 months, but in around 18 months, about 1,700 customers have taken on the journey of this new security awareness training. We've put on about 1.5 million users. The 65% is, these two are probably my most important points on this slide. The 65% is the average amount of engagement we get across our entire organization's ecosystem of customers. I think personally that's an incredibly high engagement rate. It's not perfect, it's not 100%, and I put this up there for that specific reason. Because I want to know right now at a company level, when you send out that new security policy, do you think 65% of users are reading that policy, right? Our program allows you to include that policy in a far more watered down version and focus on the points that are really pertinent to that topic. So, hey, your USB is locked down. This is why that's important, right? And there's 3 points. People are engaging. This entire experience takes less than 10 minutes once a month. Quick to get through, impactful and powerful. And then lastly is the change in behavior that we can actually monitor from the different attributes we score. So this is more on the behavioral sciences side. The lady that builds a lot of our content, his name's Jerry Buckle. She used to be the psychometric analysist. Don't know that word, but she used to do that at NASA. And she used to run psychometric evaluations on astronauts. Now, I don't know, I've stood around a lot of brides, and I think my job's pretty cool, but I don't think I could battle with Jerry around a barbecue saying something that cool, right? So she's able to determine that based on the way people engage with our platform, there's a 400% minimum engagement rate in changing behavior of people being more security aware. More thinking goes into that. This is why one of our biggest customers had a director open up a conference bridge with me the other day to tell me that they stopped at an orange robot. I promise you I'm not lying. And I had no idea why this was important because first of all, he's South African. We speed up for those. But he said, I started thinking, so we don't just focus on cyber awareness, we focus on security awareness. People mustn't be security focused when they walk into your doors and stop being security focused when they walk out your doors in the afternoon, right? This is a life thing. People need to think about it. I do on average about 100 flights a year. You should see what I see in airports and on airplanes, what people are working on. It's never open Facebook writing Jackie a little letter of love. It's always financials and business budgets, always. And have you know who uses the Gautrain a lot here? Have you ever noticed how much more important people want to sign on than the Gautrain on a business call? Yes, close that deal for 13 million rand. Oh, and they go crazy with personal information, which is mad. But that's a stat that we can prove based on some real basics of behavioral change and behavioral analysis. And this leads me to believe that training is not stupid. Thank you very much. Tricked Ryan. I was going to go on for another 5 minutes, and I knew he was going to have to run here.
Thanks, Dwayne. Reality, I was hoping I wasn't going to have to follow on from you, so I thought maybe if I stayed there quietly in the corner, they wouldn't pick up that I hadn't come up front. Thanks very much, Dwayne. It's going to be a tough act to follow. I just need to find a clicker. There we go. So I'm now going to hopefully not bore you to tears chatting about corporate cyber insurance. I think a lot of it is content that you've probably seen before, so I'm going to try and breeze through some of the things just to save a bit of time. Apparently lunch is really important and the food is good, so I don't want to deprive you of that. In particular, some of the stats, but let's kick off with this. So I'm going to ask everyone in the room to quickly stand up. Quick stretch to the left, quick stretch to the right. And now, because I like getting myself in trouble, I'm going to ask all the ladies to please sit down. And then I'm going to ask everyone who is not between the ages of 30 and 50 to please sit down. I see a lot of guys still standing who are very optimistic. We can be honest in this room. It's a safe space. And then finally, I'm going to ask you if you have not been with your current employer for at least 5 years to take your seat. Not. So if you have been with your current employer for less than 5 years, please sit down. If there are any HR managers in the room or anyone who has anything to do with hiring and firing, take note of the people that are still standing. You might need to send them a letter because these are the individuals who, as per the FBI's profile, are the most likely to be the malicious insiders at your organization. See, Dwayne, I had to have a comeback. So this is actually some stats from a Mimecast email security report that came out recently. And I'm going to quickly breeze through this because I do agree with Dwayne that I think from a cyber perspective, we spend so much time trying to fearmonger and scare people and switch this clicker off. There you go. That we've kind of lost the plot a little bit. I think people out there, brokers, clients, everyone perceives and understands that there is a risk. So it's time to start transitioning from this, let us make you believe there's a risk, let's scare you into thinking that there's a risk, there is a risk. Let's start looking at solutions. How do we fix this? How do we provide you with an insurance product that's actually going to help you sort of address if something happens? The inevitable, some might say, but what are we going to do about that? So let's quickly breeze through some of these stats, but importantly, I want to focus on what the cover does and how it actually aids you. So as per the report, which was done in conjunction with Vance and Bourne, they found that 41% of companies saw increases in internal threats and data leaks. 54% saw increases in phishing. I mean, these numbers are probably not surprising. We've all seen the phishing emails. We've all been exposed to email fraud, etc. 67% of organizations saw increases in impersonation and business email compromise attacks. We're starting to pick up quite a few claims on the back of this. Shame, this is a little bit of a war story. We recently dealt with a claim where the company had a third party who had been compromised. The hackers used that access to gain access to our insured's environment, built some email rules into their environment. Long story short, they got duped into paying over $2.2 million. So these things are happening. We're seeing these incidents out there. It is a reality. We need to do more in training and awareness, and basically having the insurance policy to help companies out when this is what happens to them. Some of the other stats we've got, 71% saw an attack where malicious activity spread from one infected user to other employees. Very, very common. 61% believe it's likely or inevitable they'll suffer a negative business impact from an email home attack. 53 experienced business disruption ransomware. Ransomware obviously very prevalent. We're seeing a lot of incidents from that. 88% experienced email-based spoofing of business partners or vendors. It's quite interesting how that started to spread to where guys are now standing orders. So we've had incidents where companies have had emails placing an order with them. They'll go and deliver the goods, only to later find out that actually that order didn't come from their client and they're not going to get the money for it. What do we have here? 94% of organizations experience phishing attacks. So I think we can all pretty much agree, without boring ourselves to death on the stats and numbers and stuff like that, there is a problem. Companies are exposed. They are getting compromised. We need to do something to better equip and look after our insureds. I've missed one. Sorry. 73% impersonation attacks. Business email compromise victims face a direct resulting loss. Makes a lot of sense. Quite often those attacks are geared at trying to get funds transferred to illegitimate bank accounts. Some of the companies who've been compromised in the South African perspective, I think important to note that these are just companies that have actually made it into the press and into the media. We've responded on claims for some big blue chip companies who would surprise you if you saw their names up here. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. I was having a chat to Danny earlier on, and his first comment to me was like, "Jeez, Ryan, you will not believe how busy we are. We are struggling to keep up with the demand. The market is crazy. There is a lot happening." Cost of a data breach. So this is, I mentioned the Ponemon report a little bit earlier on. So this is effectively the cost that they came to for the data breach, the $3.92 million. Multiply that by 15, unless one of our politicians had something to say this morning, then maybe it's a little closer to 20, 25. But what's interesting to see from this is how the costs are actually broken up. So where we go, 31.1% is as a result of the detection and escalation. So those are those forensic investigation costs that we spoke about, the likes of a Danny, etc., coming in, understanding what happened, containing it, helping you get that business back up and running again. 27.3% was the post-breach cost. So that is the costs to respond to the affected parties, provide them with remediation services like credit monitoring, card replacement costs, those sorts of things. 36.2% lost business costs. So that is your business interruption. And the big one is the lost opportunity cost, often from the PR damage that gets suffered. So customers now looking to deal deals with their competitors as opposed to staying loyal to the company they were dealing with. And then we have a very small percentage there, which was for the notification costs. Notification costs still relatively small from a South African perspective. As Lisa said earlier, though, we are potentially seeing POPI come into play, and that's going to start mandating that you will need to notify the affected parties if their data has been compromised. So that's a number we're likely to see increase. Quick one on this slide. So data breach root causes. I think there's a perception that quite often it's hackers that have caused the incident. So I'm just worried about hackers who have broken into my company and stolen my data. Yes, that is the biggest root cause, but we've also got human error, which comes in at 24%. We saw the video that Dwayne played a little earlier. This is a situation that does play out quite commonly. And then we've got system glitches, which account for 25%. If we look at the big Jigsaw Holdings compromise with the master deeds database recently, well, I say recently, it was about 2 years ago. That was, for all intents and purposes, a little bit of human error, where the guys had actually posted it onto a server which was internet facing without realizing that that server was internet facing. So they'd pretty much just put the data on the internet, waiting for somebody to compromise it, or not even compromise it, to go and download it. They didn't even have to hack in to get to it. So we've spoken some stats and things like that, and I said I wasn't going to try and scare you. I got a little bit suckered into the slides. Let's start talking about what does the policy actually do to try and help our insureds and to look after our clients. At its core, companies are faced with 3 core exposures from a cyber perspective. 1, data privacy breach. Somebody has got access to data that they're not supposed to. 2, a system unavailability and downtime. Oh no, all of a sudden I have no access to my data and to my systems. I thought if I moved out of the block, this would become very meaningful for those that are streaming, because now they can't see me. I was the data. Oh, look, now I'm the data and I'm back. Third one, and this is becoming very common and starts talking to that business email compromise, etc., is the unauthorized use of the environments. We see a lot of instances. We saw Office 365 earlier, where people are getting compromised, providing their 365 credentials, and then there's emails getting sent from those accounts. You can do as much user awareness and training as you want and stuff, but a lot of that training has been focused on, oh, look for a slightly dodgy email address and so forth. When that email starts coming from a legitimate source, people start placing a lot more trust and reliance on it. So this is a big sort of attack vector at the moment. What are some of the damages that companies are looking at and facing from the incidents? You can really summarize it into 3 core areas. 1, the incident response costs. So how do we go about responding to this incident, containing it, recovering? Second to that is the liability element of it. So if people suffer damages or have disruptions to their environments as a result of our environment getting compromised, they're coming to sue me. What is that going to cost me from a defense and settlement perspective? And third is the sort of resulting business impact. So your business interruption costs, the damage to your reputation, share price impact. And then often what you also have is a lot of costs incurred in actually trying to update and beef and improve the security for that environment to carry on operating. I'm not going to run through all of these. I think they're quite easy to follow, and they're all things that you've heard of before. What I really want to start getting onto is triggers to the policy and what the policy actually kind of encompasses and does as such. So if we look at the cyber insurance policy, there are 2 main core triggers to the policy. One is a network security breach, and the other is a privacy breach. This name cyber is a little bit of a misnomer. I think it often pigeonholes the policy. So a lot of clients, when they hear cyber insurance, just think of the hacking side of things, don't consider the malicious insider, etc. And I can understand why we've branded it and marketed as cyber insurance. It's a powerful name, a lot of strong connotations, but it's unfortunately not all encompassing of everything that the policy does. These are just some of the triggering events that we have that can trigger a policy, and we could pretty much sit here for hours trying to debate and open up and consider different things that would trigger it. But some of the things we got up here: corporate espionage, cyber extortion, denial of service attacks, downstream attacks. The downstream attack is quite an interesting part of the cover, which is quite often overlooked. So what that would do is, let's say that you're a broker. This is a pretty easy sort of analogy to make. And somebody has now hacked into your environment. They've embedded some form of malware into your environment. And whenever you're sending out emails to Hollard or AIG, whoever it may be, asking for an insurance quote, this malware is embedded. It's getting past their AV and anti-malware, etc. I'm sitting there, I get this quote request from you, double click, open the proposal form. Lo and behold, our environment is now being compromised. Pollard is down for 2 days while IT resolves and gets everything back up and running and recovers the environment. But they've now suffered a reduction of earnings in that period of time and a bit of reputational damage, all of these sorts of things. If you as a broker have a cyber insurance policy and Pollard comes to sue you as a result of the damages they've suffered, your cyber insurance policy is actually going to pick up the defense and settlement of that. Hacking, I guess you would expect to see on a cyber insurance policy, but this is where it then starts to get a little bit broader. So if you look at the insider and privilege misuse, so this is if you now have staff or service providers or something who are doing malicious activity or environment, these are triggers to the policy. I used to work at Deloitte in a past life, and we had an incident there where they had a disgruntled developer. I can't even remember the reason why he was disgruntled, but what he did is he basically embedded malicious code into their systems. 30 days after he left, this triggered and effectively decimated their entire operating environment. It deleted and wiped out anything and everything that it could. The company fortunately had backups, but unfortunately only backups of data, and this was years ago. So before we had things like virtual machines, etc. And it took that company around about a month or so to actually rebuild and reconfigure and get their environment back up and running before they could carry on trading. That's the type of thing that's going to trigger a cyber insurance policy as well. And that business interruption is not going to be picked up under your normal, traditional, and commercial insurance policy. Some other things we've got there: malware, physical theft and loss. So let's say you are sitting on said train and you forget your laptop on the train. You don't have encryption on that laptop or whatever the case is. Individuals are able to gain access to that laptop, or it's your phone or a memory stick which you've copied data on. You've left the memory stick lying on the train. Those sorts of events are actually going to trigger your cyber insurance policy as well. And in fact, the wording is wide enough that it will also cover if you have a loss of physical hard copy paper records. Now, I know all the brokers in the room have gone to fully digital systems, so nobody's using paper anymore. But let's cast our minds back a couple of years ago. Let's say you have a file for your client in the boot of your car gets stolen. All of a sudden, there's copies of ID books and FICA, RICA, whoever else, information and sort of standards and stuff we have to comply with. All of this is now gone with your car. That all of a sudden starts triggering a cyber insurance policy. So it's a lot broader than just cover for hacking as such. What does it cover? Now, I want to stand up here and say to you, cyber insurance is really a very simple insurance policy. Super easy to follow, not a lot of complexity to it, etc. And then I'll put up a slide like this with all these different insuring agreements and modules and names and terminology and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I think we can park that for a second, because at its heart and at its core, a cyber insurance policy is actually really, really simple. We see all of these different modules, and this is really a core policy. These are things which customers ideally should be buying and generally are buying as one single package. In my mind, I see it easiest as looking at a cyber insurance policy as comprising 3 core elements. The first one is that incident response process. And if we unpack that a little bit, it's, oh no, something has happened or we suspect something's happened. What do we do now? There is that 24/7 emergency contact number. You pick that up, you give it a ring, you get put in contact with people like Danny, for example, who are then going to try and guide you through the process. So it's, has something actually happened? What happened? How do we contain it? How do we get you back up and running? And let's gather the forensic evidence in case there is any litigation down the road. Second to that, you're going to get individuals like Lisa on the line who are going to guide you. What do you need to do from a regulatory standpoint? So we heard Poppy maybe on the horizon. GDPR is obviously up and running, etc. And they're going to tell you who do you need to notify, when, what do you have to say, when do you say it, how do you say it, and make sure that you cover all those bases and don't face any further fines or penalties, etc. Third to that, you're going to have individuals like Caroline and Alison on the line who are going to start guiding you on what do we do from a reputational perspective. Who do we talk to? How do we manage the potential damage we're going to suffer? How do we reduce that reputational impact as much as we can? And what do we start doing about our clients? So what are we going to say to them? What services are we going to provide to our clients so that they don't suffer any further damages? The policy also picks up the costs for those services. So the most common one we see is identity and credit and identity theft monitoring. There we have providers who tap into the big credit bureaus, and clients are able to sign up for notification services should there be any activity on their credit record. So my ID number was stolen from such and such a company. They are now using that to try and open up or take out a home loan. I'll get a notification of it at that point, and I can then close out that application, as opposed to then potentially suffering the damages of 6 months down the road. The bank is knocking on my door saying, excuse me, but you kind of owe us a little bit of money and we're not going to give you finance for your new car. So it starts managing all those risks. And I actually want to just almost recap that incident response process. So incident response process, core pillar number 1 of a cyber policy, all the IT costs around identifying, containing, responding, recovering, legal costs to make sure that you comply with all the regulatory requirements, PR costs to manage the potential reputational damage, communicating with your clients, and then providing your clients with remediation services to try and look after them and try and prevent them suffering further damages. We've also got the cyber extortion cover. So there's really 3 main forms of extortion that we're seeing in the market. Ransomware, which I think everyone knows and loves by now. Second to that is what's called a denial of service attack, or an RDoS attack now. So what the attackers will do is they will hit your environment, either a web server or whatever the case may be, flood it with traffic, knock it offline for a relatively short period of time, and then demand a ransom not to conduct an attack like that for an extended period of time. Very much what we saw with the threat against the banks towards the end of last year. And then the third form is where they break in, steal data, and want to hold you to ransom, not to A, release and publish that data, and B, release and publish the fact that they'd broken into an environment. Very much what happened to Liberty a couple of years ago. What the policy does to this is, step 1, looks to confirm the validity of that ransom demand. So if you're getting an email saying, hey, we've broken into your environment, we've stolen all your data, pay us 5 million rand or we're going to publish it, chances are your response is not going to be, gosh, thanks for letting me know. Please can you confirm your bank account details and we'll swiftly transfer the money to you. You want to get a bit of comfort around this. So there is a process whereby we'll look to see, was data actually compromised? Can we get an excerpt, etc. Step 2 is the policy will see if you can recover without paying the ransom. I think that's generally the best sort of thing that you want to aim for. Most applicable really to ransomware type attacks, where there could be tools available to decrypt the data. It could be that you have backups that you want to confirm the adequacy and the validity and the recoverability of. If it's determined that you can't recover and that the best course of action is going to be to pay the ransom, then the policy will also extend to negotiate and settle those ransoms as well. We then jump across into the second sort of core pillar of a cyber insurance policy. It's those additional first-party coverages. And the big sort of hero of the day there is really the business interruption cover and the increased cost of working. So while you may get business interruption and increased cost of working under some other insurance policies, remember those require that physical or tangible damage to trigger. So your fire, your flood, etc., not going to be triggered by the malicious developer, the ransomware attack, whatever the case may be. The other elements you've got on that side is going to be the fines and penalties, to the extent insurable by law. Starts becoming very relevant with POPI, GDPR, etc. GDPR, unfortunately, there are not many countries where you can actually insure those fines and penalties. There's 2 Scandinavian countries. And POPI is still a little bit of a grey area, although I do suspect we're going to end up following very much what's happened in the UK and Europe. So you're unlikely to be able to insure those fines and penalties. But what you're still going to get is the sort of legal assistance in making your representations to the regulator, etc. And it has proven in the past that where you've taken a responsible response process, so done the investigations, notified the affected parties, provided them with remediation services, those fines are then greatly reduced. So you do still have some assistance, and where we can pick up those fines and penalties, we will still do so. If we then jump over onto the third pillar, which is really where you've got the liability side of things, you're going to get the defense and settlement of any liability claims arising from data that's been compromised, or where your environment has been compromised and then used to launch attacks against other individuals or companies who've suffered damages. And at its core, that is, and then there's the digital media liability element, which has always to me felt a little bit of an American type coverage, but is starting to become a lot more relevant. What that picks up is the defense and settlement of the liability claims from defamation, unintentional copyright infringement, or unintentional infringement to rights of privacy. So if we kind of summarize a cyber insurance policy in 3 sentences, let's see if we can do that. 3 core elements to it. One is the incident response process. So that's all IT costs to identify, respond, recover, legal costs, make sure you don't fall foul of regulatory requirements, PR costs to manage reputational damage, and then the cost to communicate and look after the affected parties. Additional first-party coverages, business interruption, increased cost of working, regulatory fines and penalties. And then you've got the liability element, which is going to respond to and look after any of the sort of ensuing litigation from the compromise of your data and systems. At its heart and at its core, that is how simple a cyber insurance policy is. I think it makes sense to buy all of those in conjunction with each other, because they all flow on from each other. As we saw in the presentations from Danny to Lisa to Alison and Caroline, it's all sort of multidisciplinary. So you've had an incident, you need to understand what happened from an IT perspective and manage that side. You need to look after the legal side of things, and then you want to manage your reputation and look after those who are affected. It all kind of pieces together like a little bit of a puzzle. Does that make sense? Because I think that's kind of the core thing, is to understand, what does the policy look like? How does it tie in with the services of all these experts we've seen earlier on today? And just what is a cyber insurance policy, I suppose, at its core? Any questions on that before we move on? Does everyone feel that it makes a little bit more sense now? So now that you feel comfortable with that, we decided that we'd make things complicated and added some additional modules to the policy. So these are some of the optional extensions you can buy onto it. Obviously, the cyber environment is constantly changing, which brings out new risks to companies and new exposures, which we're then introducing the insurance coverages to manage and to look after. The first one you see up there, OSP, stands for Outsourced Service Provider. So with the advent of cloud and third-party platforms, a lot of companies have started making use of those services. And that means that the data is not necessarily resident in their own environment as such. And also they have a bit of a business interruption exposure as a result of a reliance on those providers. Now, if they are hosting data with those providers, that data is effectively covered under their traditional cyber insurance policy already. So if you have a breach, the liability, everything like that is already covered. What the outsourced service provider cover does is it starts bringing in the business interruption element to that. So I have a provider who is hosting certain of my systems and I'm heavily dependent on those. They get hacked, that system is offline for a few days. I suffer a reduction in earnings. OSP cover picks up that business interruption loss. And if they're going to be down for an extended period of time, we'll actually pick up the cost for you to change and move to a different service provider. Physical damage. So this is a very interesting sort of topic in cyber at the moment. Obviously touches on the whole sort of silent cyber exposure and which policies are or aren't covering cyber. There's an expectation that there should be physical damage cover for a cyber insurance policy, but a lot of assets policies are trying to walk away from that. We've got a relatively limited physical damage cover, so we are starting to experiment and play in that area. I personally think that it's something that's going to become a lot more commonplace in cyber insurance policies moving forwards. So we will see those limits and coverages widening up and getting higher. It is a tricky one though, because when you start looking at the physical damage side of things, you open yourself up to a plethora of new potential exposures. So, could I hack into a mine, take control of the navigation system, and drive a dump truck over the side of a cliff? What does a dump truck cost? Could I hack into a building, take control of a lift, and hold everyone in the lift hostage not to drop that lift? There's a whole sort of world of new exposures that you've got to start considering, and how do you price for and manage those? Phone phreaking, we really just added that because it sounded like a fun name. No, so what phone phreaking is a lot of companies have got their digital PABX type systems. So what the hackers have done is they will break into those environments, and then they will either call premium rate call numbers, which they own, and they cash out that way, or they will then route calls and break them out through your phone network. So there have been a number of cases where guys have kind of left work on a Friday afternoon, come back to work on a Monday morning to have a 300,000 or 400,000 rand phone bill. So this picks up those call costs, data costs, etc. PCI is for the payment card industry. So it's really only applicable to those who are storing or processing payment card details. So debit and credit card details. There are fines and penalties that can be levied if there's a compromise of those, and this picks up those fines and penalties. E-financial loss it's kind of where we're now seeing a lot of instances where companies are hacked and the guys are gaining access to bank accounts, etc., and stealing money from there. So this picks up the exposure of if somebody hacks into my company, is able to gain access to my bank account or a bank account I am legally responsible for and steals the money, it picks up that direct financial loss, but the first party direct financial loss. And those are some of the optional extras we've got at the moment. This is obviously something which keeps changing and evolving as the risk and exposure changes. Any questions on any of those before I move on from them? Happy? So looking at some of this common feedback we've had from brokers around, well, this is not the easiest insurance policy to sell. I think in part because it comes across as being incredibly complex. Don't say it is. I've just tried to explain and make it super simple. It's just the 3 core pillars. But there is a perception that because it's IT, because it's cyber, it's got to be super complex. It's got to be really technical. The policy by nature is relatively simple, but there's also these mindsets that we've got to try and get across. So a lot of companies have the opinion of, well, why would we be a target? We're a small company sitting at the bottom of Africa. We're turning over 5 million rand a year selling dog kennels. Why is somebody now going to try and hack us? The reality is that a lot of hacking is indiscriminate. So if you look at something like ransomware, phishing campaigns, etc., they are not targeted at specific companies. For a lot of those hackers, they are basically trying to cast their net as far and wide as they can. The more people they can compromise, the more likely they are to get credentials, data, payments for ransoms, etc. And that's their business model. Spread far and wide. It's a numbers game. Let's see how many guys we can get and who's going to pay us for that. Our security is top notch. Nothing is infallible. Just because you have a fancy server that's got blue blinky lights on it does not mean that you cannot get compromised. If you've got the vendors for the big security solutions and stuff standing out there and they are telling you that their solutions are not infallible, you cannot place 100% faith on those. Over and above that, you have got the human element that you've got to worry about. So the person who's left a memory stick on the train, or the person who clicks on that link, or replies on that email, or does something silly. These are all exposures which, from an IT perspective, can be very, very difficult to secure against. The disgruntled developer, so I mentioned that scenario earlier. How do you cover and protect against that? How do you foresee that happening? And of course, accidents happen all the time. A breach is my service provider's problem. So this has been a new developing trend with the whole sort of cloud migration, where a lot of companies are going, it's fine, we've outsourced IT, so if anything happens, it's their problem. You cannot abdicate that responsibility. If we look at the regulatory sort of standards and POPI and GDPR and all these things, they talk to a data custodian. So as soon as your client has entrusted you with their data, you're responsible for safekeeping and looking after that data. You can use your providers in the background, but if that data is compromised and it was from your company as such, they are going to come and look to sue you for the DOS that they've suffered and the sort of anguish that they've been through. What's also important to remember there is, even if it was your service provider's problem and you now want to go and sue them for damages and stuff, there's often very tight limitation of liability clauses in those contracts. So you can sue them for 1, maybe 2 times what their annual fees are. And that's not generally going to go a very long way in responding to a cyber incident. Where to from here? So I think we can all agree that cybercrime is on the rise. South Africa is not immune. In fact, in some cases, we're seen as being a little bit of a soft target. So it's definitely something which is prevalent in our environment. It is a key risk item. As I was saying earlier, for a lot of companies, cyber is on their top 3 risks on the agenda. We cannot depend on incidents going unnoticed anymore. So we have seen where guys have been compromised and they kind of sweep it under the carpet, hope nobody finds out. The problem is if it does break into the media, you have a lot of things to look after and a lot of damages to try and recover from. Dwayne himself also mentioned when we looked at Liberty, they were kind of made a little bit of a scapegoat. I also feel that they were responsible in trying to sort of create the awareness around what had happened, letting their clients know, etc. But they took a complete hammering for it, some of which was not really warranted or justified. The damages that can be suffered from an incident are not insignificant. Can your clients afford to take this onto their bottom line? Do they know how they're going to go about responding to an incident? What is it going to cost? We've run through and heard from a lot of experts this morning on what they do as part of the IR services. these are experts. You cannot rely on your internal IT staff, for example, to do a forensic investigation and recover. And shame we've got Jane over there who puts together adverts which we put on the website so she can now do crisis comms and stuff. This is the kind of the reputation of the business you're playing with. It takes a long time to build a strong reputation, but it doesn't take much to try and destroy that. So get the right guys in, do it properly, buy the policy if you're worried about the costs, and kind of manage it from there. As far as getting quotes and things like that is concerned, we've obviously got our proposal forms on the website. We've also got a team that is floating around, so both Candice and Luanda are here today. Give us a call, give us a shout. We're happy to come with you to your clients, chat about it, help you through filling in these prop forms and stuff. We can run free vulnerability scans for your clients. So, if you're struggling to get them across the line, let's run a scan. We can highlight certain things to them. And let's work together. I think there's a lot of value we can add to companies. I think they are starting to come around and realize that they do have an exposure. So, engage with us. Let's work together that we can kind of get more cyber policies out there and look after the clients as such. And then just as one sort of final parting shot, a quick bit of advice that you can use both in your personal lives and commercially. Treat your passwords like your underwear. Never share them with anyone. Change them regularly, and whatever you do, try to keep them off of your desk. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Okay, my name is Candice. For those of you who don't know me, I'm going to be speaking about personal lines cyber insurance. This is a policy that you would purchase for yourself, not for a company. So if we look at some stats, South Africa has significantly more financial crime than any other country, 77% compared to a global average of 49%. So what happens for me as an individual, not my company, not my nail salon, not the iTOO that I work for, but for me as an individual, if somebody commits identity theft against me, or my child is a victim of cyberbullying, there historically has not been a policy in place for these sort of exposures. So we at iTOO have created a policy called My Solution. It is a personal lines cyber insurance offering. If we look, this is poor Barbara, who is 70 years old and had 20,000 Rand siphoned off from her bank account. FNB said, sorry, we are not refunding you. What the bank's general stance is if you're a victim of fraud using an ATM or a point of sale device, they will refund partial or full loss. If you are a victim of fraud or theft of funds using internet banking or your online banking on your cell phone, they will not cover your loss regardless of how it happened. So banking app losses increased by 88% to an average of 14,000 Rand per transaction last year. Online banking by 44% to an average of 32,000 Rand lost per transaction. Here is a newspaper article where FNB said it has to be your fault because if we look at your bank account, nobody hacked you. They logged in with your valid credentials, so you must have given someone those credentials. So they would not refund her 20,000 Rand that was stolen from her bank account. And at 70 years old, 20,000 Rand, at any age, 20,000 Rand is a big loss. So if we look at our theft of funds module, this will pay you back for any funds that you have lost through a cyber incident. So it's hacking your bank account, your payment card, or your mobile wallet. The policy will respond to that loss and pay you back. You would have to get a rejection from the bank first, and that's when you would claim from us. These are some funny examples of ID books, fake IDs that I found on the internet. Okay, any matric exemptions, right? In South Africa, somebody's identity is stolen every 2 seconds. Last year, 1 million children were victims of identity theft. 2/3 of those children were aged 7 and younger, and 60% were personally related to the perpetrator who committed the identity theft against them. So hypothetically, Christmas is coming, a parent or an auntie will take out a small loan, a 10,000 Rand loan, they'll sign surety for their child, and then they don't pay that loan back. And then when the child reaches majority, they are victims of identity theft and blacklisted and can't get a cell phone. So our module for identity theft will cover all of the costs associated with the identity theft, not just replacing your ID book, but it would be for any lost income or time you have to take off work to go and apply for that, to reapply for any grants or loans or any other lines of credit, any phone calls that you have to make because you're a victim of identity theft, up to 6 months of credit and identity theft monitoring, and costs to actually pay for the new ID book. There were 9 malware attacks every single second in South Africa last year. Every second. South African Android, so any device that's not an iPhone is an Android device. South African Android mobile phones are the second most targeted in the world for banking malware. So banking malware is a specific form of malware, which is malicious software, to try and steal your banking credentials. Why? Because that's where your money is. So our third module is our data restoration and malware recovery, and this is the costs to restore any data and software that you have lost because of a cyber incident in your personal capacity, not your work, not your business policy. This is what happens to you. We've seen the headlines. These are the headlines from October. I've only put 4 on about the devastating effects of cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is a huge issue, and it's growing in South Africa. According to the 2018 Ipsos Global Views on Cyberbullying, South Africa won by a mile in terms of the percentage versus other countries. Russia, 8%, South Africa's at 54%. So it's growing, and it's a huge issue. Our cyberbullying module, we will cover costs such as removing the content. It's very important to get that content down as quickly as possible. Any lost wages. So when we talk about cyberbullying incorporates cyber stalking. Generally, cyber stalking will happen to an adult, cyberbullying will happen to a child. So if your child is being cyberbullied on a WhatsApp group, you will see who's participating in that WhatsApp conversation versus cyber stalking, which happens to an adult. Very often you won't know who's doing that. So let's say I am hired by somebody that you've had a fight with, and I start calling you incessantly every 2 minutes from 3 o'clock in the morning till 5 from a no number. How will you find that that is me making those calls? So very seldom when it's a cyber stalking situation will you catch the person doing it, unless you've broken up with a boyfriend, girlfriend, or dumped your side chick, or fired somebody at work. Very seldom will you actually know who it is. Versus cyberbullying, you will know who's participating in that. So the lost wages is for the time you need to take off work because you are a victim of cyber stalking. Our trauma benefit, that is an upfront payment for you or your child as a victim of cyberbullying to go and see a psychologist. We do not determine which psychologist you need to see, but we would give you an upfront payment so that you can see a psychologist of your choice, and that would lead on to our second additional school costs. If that psychologist determines that your child has to be moved to a different school because they are a victim of cyberbullying, and it's not going to stop and it's not going to get better, there is an upfront payment which will allow you to move your child to a new school, to purchase new school uniforms or registration fees. We will also assign experts to manage and protect your reputation through the situation. Our cyber extortion. Last year, there were 792,000 sextortion attempts, impacting only 89,000 recipients. Why that's important is because you can see that's not just one attempt. It is multiple attempts on the same person over and over and over and over. 60% of these victims personally knew who the perpetrator was. The person who is trying to extort money or materials or assets from them because they have naked pictures. So our cyber extortion policy, we will cover the cost of an IT expert to confirm the validity of their demand. If I sent you an email right now and I listed you by name, so, hi Tammy, please note I have seen that you are watching pornography and I have print screens of you. I'm going to send this to your boyfriend and your church and your company. Now, if Tammy watches porn, she should be a little concerned. If she doesn't, it's not even a valid threat. It's just a junk phishing email that's gone out. So it's very important to determine the validity of the actual email. And if required, we will pay that ransom that you have paid for this cyber extortion. Our network security, privacy, and data breach liability. This is for you, the defense and settlement of a third-party claim resulting from a cyber incident on your computer system, because your computer system, which includes IoT devices, IoT device, anything that can connect to the internet. My cell phone, IoT device, laptop, IoT device, Fitbit watches, IoT device. Pacemaker, IoT device. Car, IoT device, right? Anything that can connect to the internet is an IoT device. If your computer or your device causes harm to somebody else, this policy will help and pay for the defense and settlement of any third-party claim. Our privacy and data breach by a third party. This is the same slide that Ryan showed in his presentation. I've slowed it down just to give you the true impact of how many companies, and this is only since 2018, only companies listed on the internet where everybody can see have been breached. So I'm sure that every person in the room can put up their hands and are at least a member of one of these, if not multiple. So because you are a victim, because a company has been breached, this will reimburse your legal defense costs against the third party because they were hacked and you suffered a data breach. These are our monthly premiums, as you can see, quite a low rate. This is a volume-driven VAP sort of policy. There's no underwriting, there's no proposal form. You put it on your system just like any other personal lines policy, and the key is to sell as quickly as possible. So it's a full system integration. Happy for you to chat to us afterwards, and we can chat about that. Ryan is going to just do a little wrap-up quickly, and we are going to just, when you sign out, please fill in the CPD register. If you don't sign out, you don't get your points. You will also get one of these. This is an RFID blocking card. This is what you will put in your wallet, so that if somebody walks past you, they won't be able to scan your credit card and your debit card and steal all your money. Okay? Thank you so much for your time, guys. I appreciate it. Handing over to Ryan.
Right, guys, that brings to an end all the presentations for the morning. I hope you have found it valuable and that you've learned a couple things, got a bit of a better feel for what does an incident response process look like, how can you better equip your staff to ensure that they are not the potential risk to your business, got a bit of a feel for what does a commercial cyber insurance policy look like, how does it integrate with those response processes, what value can it provide to your client, a nice sort of intro and overview of our personal lines product. We will be available afterwards if there are any questions you want to come and ask. Dwayne's still here as well if you want to chat to him. I know Danny had to sneak off. I think Lisa sneaked off as well. But we are around. Also, feel free to contact us afterwards. Thank you for your time. There are snacks out in the front, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.